What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Metal Maniacs Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Ingersoll, and I'm here, as always, with the man who interned for one full summer learning how to clean Hell's Bells.
What's up, Jay? It's your boy, Modd.
What's up, buddy?
Yeah, you got me. I'm an intern.
Them bells better be clean, boy.
Yeah, they're tolling.
So, today we are going to go through the top 5 Swedish death metal bands.
What is that?
Yeah, so I'm going to let you know what this is, but there are so many bands from Sweden that I didn't even realize.
Oh, yeah.
When we kind of brought this topic up, there's 5 that floated around, and then as I'm looking, I'm like, holy list of bands from Sweden.
Yeah.
We're going to try to keep it mostly to death metal.
Okay.
I mean, that was kind of what we talked about, but I will name a lot of other bands other than my top 5 just so people can't be like, well, you didn't mention so-and-so and so, and I'll probably miss a few still. I have a list of like 150 bands, but and I'll mention as many as I can.
Yeah.
But the main idea of the show is the top 5. So, and that's for me personally. Or you personally. But real quick, I'll just get into a little bit of what Swedish death metal is, and we'll go from there. So it's a distinct style of death metal that emerged in Sweden, known for its unique sound influenced by the melodic death metal movement. Unlike American death metal, the early Swedish bands were heavily rooted in hardcore punk, leading it to a different, rawer sound. Gothenburg became a hub for melodic death metal, while Stockholm developed a more aggressive and unrefined sound. So the earliest Swedish death metal bands were heavily influenced by punk rock, particularly the D-beat and hardcore punk scene, with bands like Bathory pioneering the extreme metal genre in Sweden. Other early influencers included Mephisto, Obscurity, and Merciless, who combined punk elements with influences from German metal bands like Sodom and Destruction. In Stockholm, bands like Morbid and Nihilist began recording at Sunlight Studio around 87-88, creating the iconic buzzsaw or chainsaw guitar tone that would become synonymous with Swedish death metal sound. The early scene quickly expanded with groups like Carnage, Dismember, and Turblinko, which eventually led to the formation of influential bands like Entombed and Unleashed. So the Gothenburg scene was spearheaded by bands like Grotesque and later At the Gates, who became known for their melancholic and melodic approach to death metal. This style influenced other Gothenburg bands such as Dark Tranquillity and In Flames, leading to the creation of what would become known as the Gothenburg sound, a key influence in the melodic death metal genre. The Swedish death metal scene continued to evolve, incorporating elements of gothic metal, doom metal, and even folk music. Bands like Scar Symmetry, Hypocrisy, and Arch Enemy further diversified the genre, while newer bands like Bloodbath and Repugnant brought back the old-school Swedish death metal sound. So Swedish death metal had a significant influence on global metal, particularly in the United States, where the Swedecore style has emerged. The Stockholm sound, inspired by early Entombed and American bands like Autopsy and Death, has found a dedicated following, while melodic death metal has shaped the sound of melodic metalcore in the 2000s. So just a little bit about Swedish metal, kind of where it came from, just a little blurb on it there that I put together. We talked about At the Gates being such prominent figures in this and leading to the whole sound of what we have today, which is metalcore. Yeah. And you can't really deny that. That's where all that really melodic metal kind of stemmed from. There was bands even traveling to Sweden to record. So big influence on the different types of metal that we listen to. Oh, yeah. And so we're going to go through, and we're going to go back and forth, and we're going to just list our top 5 bands from Sweden. So
this will be a short and sweet. So we won't have to drag this one out too long. This will probably be a little bit of a shorter episode unless we go on at length about any particular band. But yeah, so for me, I hope I understood the assignment. I feel like some of these bands may not be death metal through and through, as some people would classify or characterize the genre. But I definitely went through a list of bands. I looked at what was on my rack. I look at what I would call death metal. A lot of times for me, it just has to have like the fry and the right drum beats, and then I don't really like necessarily need to go any deeper than that in terms of what the riffs sound like. But yeah, I picked from my catalog at home, compared to a list of like 100 or more bands from various sites, just to see what we're calling Swedish death metal.
Yep.
And I'm content with what I came up with. I've got some honorable mentions that I'll go into after my top 5 because I don't want to give away bands that are not on my top 5. I'll keep the suspense. But yeah, and I assume guest of honor.
Yeah.
I'll kick this thing off unless there's any more that you wanted to say about introducing the subject.
No, I just wanted to talk a little bit about that before we got into it, but you're more than welcome to go first. We'll go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We'll speak about each band for a couple minutes.
Sure.
And then, like you said, this don't have to be a super long episode. I just think it was a good topic to go through because of the influence of this all these bands that are actually from Sweden. So go ahead with your number 5, brother.
Yeah, I absolutely appreciate all of the 5 bands I'm about to speak to. They definitely can still get regular rotation in my listening habits when they come on. Sometimes I'll even reach just for a couple of tracks, but coming in at number 5 for me, and this could be a lot of bands, but for me today, I'm pretty solid on Hypocrisy taking the number 5 spot. Gotta love it. Gotta love it. I love Peter's vocals. I mean, Osculum Obscenum, The Fourth Dimension, the final chapter even, which they kind of start to stray a little bit in terms of like that raw death metal sound that you had on Osculum Obscenum.
Yeah.
But
and even the Fourth Dimension, that was kind of slow.
Yeah, doomy at times, but it did have a lot of the Duka Chaka, thrash and even punk. I know they get into some of that and their styling. They get into some of that punk stuff. But I absolutely love Hypocrisy. Peter's vocals as a death metal vocalist, but also bringing in the cleans, like no fear of the clean singing, that really deep, almost Peter Steele sounding vocal. Yeah. I think that you could maybe put a few other bands here, and I don't know that I'd go too much higher because there's just so many good bands coming out of this country.
Yes.
And with this style of sound, I could see maybe even swapping them for my number 4 selection, but I love Hypocrisy very much. That Fourth Dimension album was a little bit different, but that was the one that got the hook in me. And then we kind of went back and listened to the older stuff, and then you showed me Osculum Obscenum, and I was like, wow, that is raw. That is so good. So for me at number 5, just based on the diversity of this band, they were definitely death metal to start. They evolved as a lot of bands do. Not everybody's Cannibal Corpse, Slayer, and AC/DC.
Right.
Like some bands gotta grow, and I think this is a band that did a really good job of growing along the way and still remained heavy and true to their core identity of their sound, centered around Peter's vocals and their backbone beat, which is pretty steady in the pocket most of the way, even for like there's not a whole lot of flash there, but they definitely they got the right beats for their style of music. So number 5 for me, Hypocrisy.
Before I go into my number 5, I just want to say you and I didn't talk about this list either before we started.
What would be the fun in that?
It's almost like I don't even need a co-host.
Just a mirror sitting here.
What do you think about that, man? No, I'm totally kidding. I love having you as a co-host.
That's funny.
But if you haven't guessed, my number 5 is Hypocrisy as well.
I'm kind of surprised, honestly.
Hypocrisy is probably one of those bands where maybe we have to dig into them a little more. Maybe we'll do a bio. Maybe we'll do a ranked. I mean, they have 13 studio albums, and they've been around since about 91.
Right.
Peter is the man, producer extraordinaire, songwriter. Some of the other albums, he's always got like the alien lore too, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, dig it.
Got a little slow on Abducted too with some of his clean vocals and stuff. Kind of lost me a little bit in the middle. Some of the later albums that I have kind of revisited, like Virus, and that was even in 2005. So that wasn't new, but I do remember picking that one up, and that was kind of back to more some of the heavier stuff.
Yeah.
But man, Hypocrisy just you can't really say death metal and not say Hypocrisy.
Right.
Whether you're talking melodic, whether you're talking death metal in general, if I was to be like, here's just a top 10 list, and you're like, fire off 10 death metal bands.
Yeah.
Hypocrisy is going to be in there because to me, they have that staying power, and Peter has that name attached to him, like Chris Barnes or Corpse Grinder, or just to name a few off top. But he is one of those characters in metal that is just a staple. He's done so many cool things. I know he's got kind of a side project, like I think it's called like Pain or something like that, or what was it called? Something like that.
Yeah, hit a couple.
Like, so he's got some other things going on, but producer, all that kind of stuff. Nothing but respect. But yeah, number 5 for me, Hypocrisy.
Yeah, and I love his vocal diversity, not just high, low, mid.
Yep.
You got the clean vocals too. He also has some different he just has a lot of different vocal stylings, not just like your 3 tiers of mid, low, high. He'll get into some more punk sounding stuff. He can be very discernible and audible in his enunciation. So just a great metal vocalist. I think one of the best, probably I dare say criminally underrated overall. Like I think that not enough love shown to him and his band, but a great figure in metal. But speaking of great vocalists, we move on to my number 4 selection. And if you have this band at 4 also...
I guarantee our 4 doesn't match.
Okay.
Guarantee.
Okay, because I know you... and I'm looking at this list, and I'm thinking, Jay's probably going to have some more of these deeper, more death metal sounding bands in his list. We'll see. But for me, at number 4, talking about Soilwork and my boy Stride. I'll call him either. I don't care.
Call him whatever you want. Call him just Speed.
Yeah, Speed.
Yeah.
Soilwork, from the start, a very death metal sounding band. They would go on to evolve and become more either a deathcore or a metalcore even sounding band.
Yeah, more like prog.
Yeah, and now we're into like the prog era of their career where it's just very orchestral. And but when you get into some of the early and mid stuff, like you got me. Like I am such a fan. Either was it Chaos? The White Album, Natural Born Chaos.
Yeah, Natural Born Chaos. Yep.
And then you've got Stabbing, The Drama.
Yep. Great album.
Great fucking album. And then their earlier work, you had, I don't have the album names in front of me, but Steel Bath.
Suicide, that's the first one.
And then what was the follow-up to that?
Chain Heart Machine.
That's the one.
I mean, that's, I rank that as top 5 records of all time for me. So.
And then, again, when we talk about vocal diversity and hypocrisy, you have that and some probably in Soilwork.
Yeah.
Just a great vocalist. They've gone through a lot of members, and with that, you get a lot of different sound over the years. The albums really distinguish themselves as their own pieces. You don't have a lot of duplicate albums in their catalog. So even though they did kind of evolve out of death metal, I think when we're talking about top Swedish bands of all time, and especially with respect to their earlier catalog, you got to have them in the conversation. I think their death metal albums alone are going to stand above the bands that maybe are consistently death metal through and through.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you nail down a solid couple of death metal albums in your career and you're at the top of your game, it's fair to move on from that and not try to replicate yourself, which is what Soilwork has done. So for me at number 4, I'm going Soilwork. Absolutely love this band, and long catalog again, a lot of work there, and some of it is a little bit more for me and others not as much, but overall just a great band with a lot of good work. So love it. Jay, what do you got for number 4?
So this one might be a little bit of a surprise to you, just because I don't think you're too familiar with this band that I know of. But for me, when you're talking Swedish metal, death metal, stuff like that, I got to go with number 4, Dissection for me.
Okay.
Not a huge discography by these guys.
Sure.
They started in '89 by John Nodvetit.
Okay.
And these guys could maybe be considered like black metal at times, but they're I think it's just more like the type of Satanism this guy was into, killed himself with a satanic Bible open, all this stuff. So there's like a lot of like things that follow follow this band around. But Storm of the Light's Bane, one of the sweetest like black metal, death metal albums, like one of the best albums out there that came out in '95. And then they had a couple other records along the way. Not a big catalog on these guys, but just the music alone and where they stand for having such a small catalog, just for the amount of respect and the music itself, like these guys are top tier to me. I think this is a band that you I know there's a million bands to listen to, but like might be one of those bands that like you know, you didn't listen to as much as you probably should have, but I think it's one of those bands you would like as well. But just looking at the list of Swedish bands, Dissection goes in at number 4 for me.
Yeah, I was pulling up the wiki here. There was also an arrest on a murder before the suicide. So about 9 years removed from an arrest.
We talked a little bit about, we kind of went through the Dissection period in metal in the black metal episode. So if you guys want to go listen to that, I'll put it like right here in the podcast, like the little ticket if you guys want to watch that. But finish watching this first.
Yeah.
But Dissection comes in at number 4 for me. Just everything that surrounds this band, just raw, cool, melodic, Black and Death, and I just big ups to Dissection, man.
Sounds like they were part of the True movement too.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, the dude was a Satanist, so you know, a different kind of Satanist, but you asked him, and
he was
for sure.
He was real about it.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah, so definitely a band that I'm not too familiar with. I'll have to see if I can find something that resonates with me. Neither recommended to me very often, nor has it crossed my path just any other way. Maybe on the XM, but because they haven't really been functional since 2006, that's probably a good reason why.
Their albums are more classics, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, and they just fit that time.
But moving on to number 3 for me, obviously this band's got to be on the list. You're talking In Flames. I mean, I know that they have definitely grown out of that sound, but it definitely started there with Lunar Eclipse. And then moving on to the Jester Race, you've got, this more the melodic sound of the death metal, but I think for sure, Horacle, Colony, Clayman, these are more melodic and even of the major sound at times, like the major key, but I gotta love In Flames I won't say start to finish. They definitely got some albums where I'm passing.
Yeah.
But when you start and you come around to where they are now, or they're kind of like revisiting that sound in a genuine way, and they're putting out heavy music again, and we'll see what happens going forward. And more power to them evolving and then revisiting, because they're so long in the tooth and been in the game for so long now. Early 90s, I want to say. But In Flames has got to be a band that goes on the list for me. Maybe not the heaviest, but I love so much of their early work that I couldn't see having this conversation without putting them in there. And for me, it's the melody. It's that rich, lush, dual-sounding harmonies that these guys are able to pull off. And there's the heaviness, too, that wins me over when we get into the heavy and move away from the melody. They do a really good job of that. I'm not a big fan of Anders when he hits the clean vocals. I think there's a lot of auto-tune that kind of comes along with this guy.
Or not.
Yeah, or not, where it's just like the raw Anders vocal.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and bag on him. I think where he shines is like the metal vocal, the rasp, and he's got a unique kind of a wailish cry going on. I just saw them live. They did the thing. We got Chris Broderick in the fold now. Bjorn's still holding it down on the other fiddle. They sound like themselves again, and I'm happy that they're back to doing heavy music. A lot of that stuff in the middle there, I'll probably just pass on. It's just not for me. It just doesn't sound like what I want out of In Flames. More power to them evolving and doing what they like and what they felt like they needed to do. But when it comes to just the heavy music from this band, and that earlier stuff, the first 5 or 6 albums, they're just knocking them out every step of the way. So I couldn't, again, another band, I'm looking at the long list, and a lot of these bands I'm either not as familiar with, but when it just comes to like my collection and we're talking Swedish metal, Swedish death metal, I got to have In Flames in there for me.
That's your number 3?
That's number 3 for me, big dog.
Okay, well, what do you know? It's number 3 for me as well.
What do you know?
What do you know?
Come on, get out of my bathtub.
But just to, water's a little cold, but just to piggyback off that, I mean, talk about evolution of sound. Like, not just being stuck in one thing, even from the beginning record all the way through, but just the musicianship, like you said, the melodicism, like all the elements that they've added. They did lose me in about 2002 with Reroute to Remain. Everything else before that, I could rock, I could jam. Even Clayman got a little weird at points, but I know it's, revered as one of their greatest albums, and it is a great album. But then coming back, we'll just, skip the little middle discography, and there's probably a few in there that I should listen to that were probably better than what I thought. I just felt like on Reroute to Remain, like when he started singing clean more, and they get into more poppy structures and less, and that's when they lost Jesper, I believe, too. It was right around there. I thought like after around there.
He hangs around for a few more.
Oh, does he? Okay. Yeah. Well, anyway, I lost touch with them when they started doing a lot of clean and a lot of really dynamic stuff around that 2000 era. Going back to that 2000 era where some good music was coming out, some of it was questionable. We're kind of in a weird spot there, and that was probably for them. But anything before that, and then you come back around in 2023, Foregone, if I remember correctly, last year made it very high on my list of top 10 albums anyway. So like coming back and just knowing that they still rule, they still rock, they can still play all their heavy stuff, they're still technical, and they still do everything else that their fans probably want them to play. In Flames, number 3 for me as well. More on the melodic Gothenburg style sound.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about a few of these death metal bands, but they might not be in my top list. But I will talk more about, because there are going to be a few bands on here where people are going to be like, well, what about the blah, blah, blah? And I'm going to tell you about blah, blah, blah in just a minute, but they might just not be my top 5. Right. But going back to what you and I always like, great musicianship, great songwriting, and melody always helps move these bands along into the top of our CD racks where we want to listen to them, right? Because that melody, it's just something, when you put that melody in it, that's why I said you'd probably like Dissection, because they do have melody and they have, some groove and stuff, that it's not just in your face black metal or whatever. Right. There's some death metal parts, but they are melodic as well. So that's why I thought, but it's kind of funny, the bands that I am rambling about in my top 5 are all really melodic bands. But In Flames, number 3, great. Not just the early stuff. Early stuff was death metal, came out of death metal, came back around. They probably are death metal, metalcore more now.
Yeah.
But they did start off death metal, and they were a huge factor in this Gothenburg sound that we alluded to a little bit before, or we got into our list.
Yeah, I mean, there could be 100 Swedish death metal bands doing death metal, tried true, dyed in the wool, and just death metal through and through every single album. But when we talk about In Flames, I think they were one of the bands that did it so well that they could afford themselves the luxury of moving on from it and saying, I don't have to sit here and repeat myself, and I don't want to repeat myself. Yeah. I want to do something new. With regards to Jesper Stromlund, he left after 2010's Sounds of a Playground fading, and I think then, again, we're talking about like far removed from their roots and their death metal sound. I know that I liked Soundtrack to Your Escape, which followed up Reroute to Remain. Sense of Purpose was all right by me. And then really, you got to get to Foregone before I'm rocking with them again. But I can respect and love In Flames. If you have been a friend of mine over the years and you've seen some of my comments on social media, you have seen me be not nice about this band at times, and that's on me. I gotta drop that when I don't appreciate a band's efforts. Just kind of let it go. It's not for me, and it doesn't mean I gotta poo on their work, because it's really just all I gotta just do is just say, nah,
not for you,
not for me. And people that do like some of these more rocking In Flames albums, more power to you. Who cares what I like or what I don't like? And I do feel bad in hindsight, maybe making some of these comments just on the thought that any one of these members might perchance pull up any of these comment sections and read it. That would be rude to have to read, people writing negative things about you, which is really not how I want to be. And just because I don't really care for those albums doesn't mean they're a bad band, at all. And I've seen them live, thankfully, a number of times, just kind of along for the ride. Maybe I wasn't there to see them, but the times that I did see them, they owned it, and I thought they did a great job. I enjoyed seeing them last year with Meshuggah.
Nice.
So, yeah.
That leads you to your number 2.
Was it my turn? Yeah, I went on at length there. I thought it was your turn again. But so for for number 2 for me, a band that I feel like spawned an entire genre after their own likeness, Meshuggah. Yep. So, yeah, like I said, I just saw these guys last year. I think it was December even of 2023. And very, very much their own style. I don't even know. Like, it's even questionable calling them death metal, but I mean, they definitely started there with the very early stuff. You know, it's very raw. And then you get into what we call gent. And I know it's a divisive word and topic for people. Is it a genre? Is it a style? It's definitely something that feels like it came from Meshuggah when you're talking about the synchronicity of all of the instruments, and also what feels like a lot of off time, or maybe 4/4 or 8/8, but just the way that their drummer decorates these beats and the placement of the snare and the way that the guitars, the rhythm of them, like they sound so jilted and hard to follow. But leading up to the concert, I told my wife, you got to come with me. Like, we just got to go and experience this together, you and me, Bonnie and Clyde. And I would make her like kind of listen to it. And I'd say, if you listen to the guitars, it's hard to follow. Like, what is happening? It just doesn't make any sense. But if you kind of like try to put those in the background and then listen to the drums first, and oh, that makes sense. And then you have the guitars happening over it. It's like this really weird phenomenon, almost like a polyrhythm sound.
Yeah.
In their style. I could see a lot of people not liking this band because there's a somewhat of a lack of melody here, and there's not a lot of vocal diversity. But to me, these guys invented a whole genre. They're kings. I like the sound well enough. I'm not a fan of every single song or every single album, maybe, but you've heard me talk about this band before on the show. I kind of surprised myself with my appreciation for them because it's almost like 50-50, but they're so unique and they did so much for metal that I constantly throw them flowers. I don't want to put on like I like them more than I do, but some of their songs are such bangers and they have such groove to them that I just have a hard time denying the impact that they have on me personally and the impact that they've had on metal overall. I look forward to whatever they do next. I love their last album. It's a little bit slower, but the drums are so phenomenal and the grooves are hard. I do wish for vocal improvement every step of the way with this band. I feel like this guy's screaming about coffee. That's the meme. Like, that's just like, I need my black coffee.
Yeah, he's pissed.
Yeah, but I do love the band overall. I think they can improve in some departments, but a mainstay in the metal community, love them or hate them, I don't think you can deny the legacy of this band, as it were. And I place them above the other bands just because of the uniqueness of their sound and what an impact they had on the entire culture of metal. Like, coming off of Meshuggah, you get so many other bands that they kind of stem from them, and then they move into progressive or more virtuoso style guitar work, like a Born of Osiris maybe comes to mind, where like they don't sound like Meshuggah, but then they kind of do with the low tunings and that very genty percussive sound. A lot more going on with them on the melodic side. And there's a lot of bands that spawn off of this. You know, Within the Ruins is one. You get a whole, like, After the Burial.
Monuments.
Yeah, you get a whole...
Periphery at times.
Just a whole door unlocks, and everybody just kind of, like, holy shit, we can do a lot with this sound, and I got to throw flowers on Meshuggah every opportunity that I get. I'm not having this conversation without talking about Meshuggah. Maybe they would be 5 on somebody else's list because there's just not enough diversity. But for the songs that slap, man... And I can cherry pick off of every album like a handful of songs and then put like a best of Meshuggah album out and then be like,
that'd be the one I have to listen to.
Man, maybe I'll have to do that for you just to see if I can, because I know I'm always trying to sell you on it. I'm just, hey man, Meshuggah. And it's cool. Like, I know I don't expect them to come out on your top 5 list, and that's okay, because again, when we talk about like people's tastes and just allowing them to like what they like, it's not like I'm going to be mad at you for not loving on them.
Yeah.
And I can see that too. And I almost question myself at times because I'm like, some of the stuff just drones.
Yeah.
And I get that too. Like, man, some of the stuff I got to skip.
It's hard to, for me, it's hard to do 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Or 47
Respect.
or 53
I get it.
of Meshuggah. It's just one of those things where it's like, at first I'm just like, man, fucking bangs. And then 4 songs later, I'm like,
it's over.
It's the same. it's bangs. It's still good. I still respect them. It's still the musicianship is top tier. I'm still confused as fuck.
Yeah.
But I'm still like, oh, well, I'm just waiting for something to happen, and it just never kind of happens.
I get that.
It's all happening, but it just never happens, if that makes sense, right?
It doesn't really crescendo into peaks and valleys. They kind of they serve it up to you, and it moves a little bit in and throughout the songs. But for me, there's a bit of a nostalgic factor too here, because I would play my video games where I'm like kind of focused on my gaming, but it's one of the bands that, because of the way that the songs go, and there's not a lot of peaks and valleys, but that beat you can kind of count on. I could just lock in to like listening to Meshuggah over the top of my gameplay, and it was one of the bands where I wasn't like terribly distracted from it, but I would just be hype on my gaming experience because of it. It just enhanced it. It was one of those things where it was like, I'm juiced up right now. Let's go. I'm running around. I'm jumping around. I'm killing shit. Like, and I would just hear like spasms or various songs where I'm like, man, I gotta just like, no conversation with anybody else. I'm just dialed in to my music and my gaming experience. So again, that's just a personal thing for me where I listen to it. Maybe for other people, it's weightlifting or riding a bike or something like that, where they can just really dial into the music, where again, you don't have like too slow of a moment, or you don't have too intense of a moment. I know they can get to that punk thrash a little bit, and they can definitely find their groove where they're working the toms, but just a great band for me, and I'm not having this conversation without them, so I got them at number 2 all time, coming out of Sweden, Meshuggah.
Totally respect it. A powerhouse of a band, a band that, like you said, when there is a band, which we will talk about, that's led to many other bands. Yeah. Or you have a band like Tool, where they're a one of a kind, and Meshuggah still is one of a kind. Yeah, and that I respect completely. Yeah. They had the one CD, what was it, Catch 33, that was just a 33-minute song or something, or they had one that was like just a long song, and I remember there being some dynamics in that, and I think if I look over there, I think I have 4 different Meshuggah albums, to be honest, so it's not that I've ever really disliked them. I just think I was always kind of looking for something else, and it just never really happened. But as far as like being a force, plus you've seen them live a couple times, which that helps. I'm sure too, because I've never seen them live, so I'm sure if I seen them live, that might like impact my idea about them a lot more. Yeah, maybe not. I don't know, but a lot of times the live show sets things off for me too. Like it gives me a whole different experience. But nothing but respect for those guys. Obviously not in my top 5. I never got into them. Didn't expect it. Yeah, so.
I will say, having seen them on the most recent tour, now these guys are getting a little bit older, so they're not jumping all over the stage like Randy Blythe. Like that guy amazes me, like that he can still go left to right all over the stage at his age. But these guys, they pretty much stood in front of their big tall monitors and different lights would go. So it was more about a light show thing.
Okay, yeah,
and just kind of like being in awe of their drummer. But yeah, there's a lot of just kind of standing there at this point. And so if you're wanting a lot of activity out of the musicians, you're not going to really get that, I think, at this point in their career. Maybe earlier footage of that exists where they were younger and bopping around and thrashing around. But now they're just kind of dialed into their instruments, and they got to do this thing a lot every night. So I liked the light show aspect of it. I liked the visuals of it. They had a lot going on these screens, so I think that's where the live thing comes in, to where you're like, it's almost like a Tool thing. They just stand there, right? Yeah. Their bassist moves around. Maynard walks about, but he's in the background. He kind of peeks out in front, goes back to the back, and it's all about that screen and that whole like atmosphere. And I think that's where the Tool thing kind of comes in with respect to Meshuggah, is it's more about a visual live performance than just 5 guys just headbanging on stage and getting rowdy. Like, that doesn't really exist for them anymore.
And it makes it about the music too. Yeah,
and
which is cool.
And I love that experience too. I love the light show. I love knowing that just the sonic blended with the visual, and it really worked for me. I enjoyed my experience seeing them live. Better than when I saw them prior, when they were like on Chaosphere. Yeah, and it was just like rowdy and noisy.
Okay. So my number 2 band we already mentioned, Soilwork.
Okay.
I'm just a big fan of Soilwork. I love Soilwork. Like I said, the Chain Heart Machine is one of my top 5 albums of all time. When I first heard them, I was like, what the hell is this? I am so impressed by whatever's happening here. Mm-hmm. It came in after At the Gates left me sad.
Yep.
and depressed. And
Closed down shop.
Yeah, they closed down shop. They said, see you later, not open for business. Business hours are no longer a thing. So Soilwork, just love them. I don't really want to repeat anything that you said, but just great vocals, great songwriting. Overall, the discography, like they have more stuff that you can jam than you can't. Like the only album I didn't really like was Natural Born not that, it was Figure Number 5.
Yep.
But then I listened to it like the other day when I was working out, and I was like, okay, now that my tastes have evolved and I know what this is, it's better than what I thought it was.
Yep.
I just wanted Chain Heart Machine or Predator's Portrait again, and that's just how you go sometimes. You got your favorites and you want more of that, and then you don't get that, and then you get this polished, like clean radio rock version of metalcore. And I was just like, what the fuck is this? This is kind of some pussy shit. I don't want to hear it. But that was me at the time. Now I do respect that. But Soilwork, as far as like discography, like I mean, they have more albums that I would crank than not. You know what I mean? So like they just put out a lot of great music. Some of the newer stuff I'd have to get back into a little bit just to kind of see where they're at. But I know I've heard over the last, 5-7 years, some of the stuff that they put out is some of their better work still. So they're still putting out great work. Soilwork, just one of those bands. I would say they're like almost like, I mean, they've been out forever, so they're not really a second wave of melodic death metal. I just think when they became a little bit more popular after like the At the Gates faded away and stuff like that. But what a great fucking band Soilwork is.
Yeah, and without having to say too much more about Soilwork, I know the last album that I fully appreciated was the Ride Majestic, but now we're already going back 9 years in time to 2015.
Great album.
And then they've got Verkleiten in 2019.
Yep.
Couldn't get into it.
That was kind of slower and weird,
It just was way more orchestral, and it sounded like the side project that the other members are in.
Yeah.
What is the name of that band? Something Fly, something... Or orchestra. It's got the word orchestra in it, I think.
Night Flight Orchestra or something like that.
So I felt like that influence was way too prevalent on that album. I really did try, but it didn't hit me with the heavy like I wanted. It sounded like a lot of instrumentation going on, and these guys are virtuosos, but just like... That one wasn't for me, but again, you're talking about they've also got a 2022 album that I'm 100% ignorant on, so I have not even heard.
That's a new daddy.
Overgivenheiten. I'd have to sit down and listen to that and see.
Is that an EP though, or is that a full album?
It doesn't say either way.
Okay.
Let me see here if it's got more information on it. A 12th studio album.
Okay.
Says,
I might have to crank that one. Maybe I will listen to that one on the walk today because I'm not familiar with that one either.
But I wanted to say just in general, when you're talking about like going from Chain Heart Machine to Figure Number 5, we talk about bands being able to grow, but also as listeners, our tastes do change, and we got to allow for those two things to go 180 from each other. Your style is going away. My tastes are also changing, or my expectations of you are like, I need the same as what you've been doing, but better.
Yeah.
And that's just an awful expectation to have, ultimately, end of the day, objectively. Like, oh, do what you've done, but better every time. Like, that's maddening. That's kind of rude. Like, dude, I can only be so good at what I've already done. Like, would you allow me to please do something else? And so when you get to, like, Figure Number 5, I kind of liked it, but I could also see where it's just like, okay, we're doing a lot of power chord progressions. It's kind of very simple. Where's the riffs? Where's the heavy?
Yeah.
And I get that too. But I do think that there are some good songs on there. Yeah. But by and large, I would tend to agree that there's a lot of filler stuff happening on this album too, to where you kind of get bored of it. Mm-hmm. I do think the 4 or 5 songs that stand out, and maybe I'm being generous with that amount, but I thought they were really good songs. But good songs don't make a great album.
Right.
I think that you can just have those songs and be like, oh, that's cool. Could have been an EP. Could have been like, yeah, we wanted to do something that was more in the hard rock vein. But tastes change and also styles change within the band. So these two things can go 180 from each other, as stated. And his
vocals could lean towards that anyway because of the cleanness and all of the vocal variety that he can do.
Yeah.
So it
really
made
great singer.
sense. It made sense. It's not like he's trying to scream over hard rock. You know what I mean? Like, his vocals evolved, and they evolved as a band. The album before that, Natural Born Chaos, the one that Devin produced, it's heavy as shit, dude. There's some, like, flying stuff, and then you put on Figure Number 5, and there's 0 of that on there. So that was just such a it wasn't even like a gradual. It was just like, oh, here's like, there's a little bit of hard you could say it's metal for some, an average guy, but we have an extreme metal podcast. We're not going to say that's metal.
Yeah, that's to me, Figure Number 5 is like a hard rock album.
Exactly.
It's like the Euthanasia or Cryptic Writings of their catalog.
Yes, absolutely.
It's probably some of their lightest work. I still got love for it though. Like I can listen to it for what it is. In their own catalog, it's kind of going to be lower for my own personal expectations of them. I kind of want. I want, a Sworn to a Great Divide, or I want a Natural Born Chaos, or a Stabbing the Drama, or a Chain Heart Machine, or even Steelbath if you want to get raw with it. Like I do want the heaviest that they can bring me. I love the melody. I love the clean vocals, but I can't sit there in the pocket with the chord progressions all day when I know a band of their caliber can do so much more for me. Sometimes I can be let down. But, like more power to them. When you're going on 20 some years in the game, we're talking late 90s to now, you're definitely 25 plus in the game. You got to have diversity in your own catalog for your own sanity, I'm sure. And just to break up your set too, because how many times are you going to write a Natural Born Chaos, So, great band. I agree with you with them at number 2. I think it's my turn to number 1.
Yep.
I
guarantee it's the same.
I got a sneaking suspicion. It's as if we grew up together, riding in the same car together, going the same places all the time, hanging out all the time, starting bands together, listening to the same music,
sharing music.
Yeah, obviously we are close like that. That's what makes the podcast fun every Sunday. But guaranteed our number 1 at the gates, so we can just kind of back and forth spitball this one.
Yep.
I knew when I came downstairs and I saw you wearing the shirt. I knew what kind of morning it was gonna be.
Well, that's the kind of morning it is.
At least the prior episode had a little more diversity.
Not much, but
yeah, surprisingly. But at the gates, another band. When I talk about Meshuggah, where they spawned a whole genre.
Yep.
At the gates, kind of spawned a whole genre after them, and we call it deathcore. I know a lot of people hate this term.
Metalcore.
Metalcore? I feel like it's kind of deathcore.
Really?
Because when I think of metalcore, I think of like those big soaring choruses that Killswitch Engage brought to the table.
Yeah.
And they kind of jump into that major chord progression. So that's what I think of when I think of metalcore. When I think of deathcore, I think of At the Gates, even though it's like thrash deathcore, and they don't really have like the breakdowns that the deathcore brings. They're pulling that. I just felt like it's deathcore because it's death metal, but the deathcore guys took what At the Gates was doing and then just started to put in those breakdowns.
Oh, okay.
That's how I look at it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fair to say that they could have spawned 2 genres.
Yeah.
Because the metalcore happens too, where you got kind of that happy thrash.
Yeah.
And then they go into the choruses that At the Gates didn't really do. I mean, they have choruses, but they don't have those big soaring over the top vocals with Thomas Lindberg. But talk about a vocal monster. Just from the raw death metal standpoint, like this guy's like jaw seems like it comes unhinged with those slurry, sloppy, wet like vocals, and he's just got like the highs. I don't know him for his lows.
No, he don't really have it. He's got a very distinct voice, though. You know it's Lindberg when you hear it.
Yeah, and that's what I love about At the Gates is that vocal can have my attention at the register that it comes in on, like that mid to high. I love him for it. It fits the music so well. It's what I want out of extreme metal vocalists is the capability to sound just like that man. Can you do a Thomas Lindberg? I would call it a Thomas Lindberg. Can we do a Thomas Lindberg here?
Yeah.
Like that's the vocal style that I want people to be able to replicate.
Yep.
I mean, there's all types of, like fry vocals and false chord vocalists, but I want people to just kind of know the ability to do Thomas Lindberg style vocals. And you talk about guitars all day with these guys. We talk about In Flames with the melody. I think these guys do it too. I just feel like At the Gates is more for me end of the day because not only do they do the melody well, but they stay heavy and mean almost all the time.
Yeah.
I really got love for their most recent works. I know when we did the bio on them, I was like, oh, they got an album I didn't know about. No, I fucking listened to it.
Yeah.
I knew it. I just forgot about it. Why? Because I think I was in that Slaughter of the Soul hangover, and it sounded like that.
That's what you wanted.
Yeah, and it sounded really good, but I was so like tied to Slaughter of the Soul that, again, when you talk about wanting a band to replicate their work and do it better, this is what happens when you try to do that. I think you get an album that sounds like it. How do you stand above it, though? You can be right there, like just the same style, same attitude, riff-wise and everything, but how do you transcend that? And I think the only way sometimes for a band to transcend their previous work is to branch out, and that's why in their newest album, and it's getting a couple of years old now, they did a lot of things where they branched out. There's a lot of orchestration. There's a lot of acoustic stuff on there. It sounds different, but it sounds like half of that deathcore Slaughter of the Soul style, and then another half of it like really instrumental, where you almost got like Terminal Spirit Disease vibes with the acoustic work and some new orchestration, either like piped in keys or violins and stuff like that. That I just loved it as an album. Clocks in really short. Most of the work is north of 30 minutes, south of 40, so I could dial up the At the Gates albums really quickly just so I can get names in here. Nightmare of Being, 2021. Absolutely loved it. I mean, I highly recommend. I also loved To Drink from the Night Itself.
Yep, very good record.
Fucking banger of an album, underrated. I think I got the deluxe edition of that. And I think, what was it? At War with Reality.
Yeah. So, that was almost 20 years removed from Slaughter of the Soul, too.
Yeah.
So, like, you're wanting this album from 95 that had such an impact. And we talked about this on the Bio episode. Go listen to that if you haven't, or go watch it, please. We appreciate that. Especially if you like At the Gates. Or
show this band some love.
Right. Or show a friend.
Yeah, for sure.
That likes At the Gates. We would appreciate that. But, they've been around since 1990. They put out one of the most prolific albums of all time, Slaughter of the Soul. If you're a metalhead and you don't know At the Gate, Slaughter of the Soul, I don't know what the fuck is the matter with you.
Yeah,
but at the same token, I don't expect everybody to know everything, but it's very hard to find a metalhead that doesn't know about Slaughter of the Soul.
Right.
Spawned, I feel like a whole genre of music itself. I would call it more metalcore just because of the bicka melodic type of all over,
that melodic thrash.
Alternate picking thrash type stuff. Because, I understand where you're coming from with the Kill Switch with the big soaring choruses, but the Kill Switch verses, that's basically At the Gates, like and the two guitars kind of.
That palm-muted.
Yeah, exactly.
Picking.
And then, a lot of bands came off of that. But Slaughter of the Soul is such a great record. So I think when At War with Reality came out, I bought it. I was so hyped for them to come back. And I was like, this isn't Slaughter of the Soul. But then when we did the Bio episodes and I listened to some of their later work, this is probably, of all the bands we talked about, and this is why they're number one, this is the strongest catalog. I fucking love Gardens of Grief. The Raw EP, it's just so death metal and in your face. Yeah, it doesn't sound that great, and if you're comparing it to the Nightmare of Being, it's way different, but there's something about the Gardens of Grief that just, like you said, it almost makes that hair stand on fuck, I can't even speak. The hairs stand
excited.
up. Yeah, exactly. The hairs stand up on my arms when I listen to that because I just feel like I'm right there. I'm there with them in the studio, and I just love their old school stuff too. But what a great catalog. What a cool band. It was cool that they came back, got their flowers, because they went away, and Slaughter of the Soul wasn't that big of a deal until they went away.
Right.
Then they went away, then everybody loved Slaughter of the Soul, spawned all these bands that wanted to sound like it and all this shit, and then they're off, like, not a band forever. And then when they came back, then they could start selling out arenas and selling shirts and selling all tickets and all these things, and then they're like, oh, we made a great piece of art. Now we can live off of it, because the reason why they quit is because they couldn't make any money. It was just a money pit for them, and then obviously being older and more mature when they come back around or whatever too, that does help. But what a fucking awesome band, dude. What a great band.
Very consistent catalog, a band that I still have yet to see live, so that's something I'm gonna have to.
Yeah, they're on my list too, bro.
I'm going to have to just keep it on my radar. A lot of times for me, it's just about logistics. No matter how much I love a band, I get it. Some people are fanatics, and they will just drop everything to go and see the band that they want to see. Doesn't matter what's going on in my life. I am going to go. I'm going to buy the ticket before I know anything about work, school, family, holiday. Don't care. Birthdays, out the window. Some people are just like that. As much as I would love to go to every concert that I want to go to, I just can't logically go across. And some of these bands, like At the Gates, they're not really coming to Grand Rapids, to my knowledge. If they have, it's been under my nose and I missed it, or it's a long time ago. But mostly it's Chicago or Detroit, so that's kind of like a whole day. So at this stage, it's almost like 2 days, because you got to go and spend the night. And then it becomes money. Holy shit, am I going to buy? Concert tickets are not cheap, But then you start to get into hotel prices and parking your car and gas and food.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's a thing where I haven't had the opportunity to see this band, unfortunately. They are on my list. I'm always going to keep them on my radar and pay close attention to when they're coming through. But very consistent catalog, even when you get to, coming back around after the long break when they did At War with Reality. Sounds like At the Gates. It sounds like good At the Gates. And I was actually kind of disappointed in myself when we did the bio and I had forgotten it. Because I knew when I listened to it, I liked it. I was like, this is strong, but it doesn't outshine Slaughter of the Soul, and nothing does. And that's when you kind of do have to move on from it. To Drink from the Night itself was a great album. I think it was a great follow-up to At War with Reality, and certainly, a strong album in the later end of their career, at the end of their work here and in their more recent days. I love The Nightmare of Being. Like I said, speak highly of that one. I think it's a little bit more instrumental and melodic and not as thrash heavy as, Slaughter the Soul, At War with Reality, and To Drink from the Night itself. But a strong album. I love the diversity there. And I think when you're talking about Sweden and you're talking about metal, I don't know who is going to supplant At the Gates at number one. I mean, anybody can say anything. I mean, I've got honorable mentions we'll get into.
Yep, I got a list that we'll go through here.
But
and
I mean,
we'll
none of these
speak on them,
and any of these could be in anybody's top five. And maybe I think just you and I, we come from like a lot of appreciation for melody, which they shine at.
Yep.
But they're also like just heavy in your face, like. Take the melody out of it for a couple of riffs and just get mean with it, and they do a really good job of that. So I got to have both of these worlds walk hand in hand very well. I can't just have heavy for the sake of heavy nonstop and brutality and grind and thrash. I got to have the breaks where, okay, breathe, and there's instrumentation and melody. At the Gates really does a good job with that. Again, they could probably... Every band can do some things better than others and improve. I think if Thomas became an even more well-rounded vocalist, that could be interesting.
Yeah,
but we've seen where with Anders, I don't think that really worked out very well.
Yeah, I mean he got better though.
Yeah,
he get better.
He did, and the clean singing does get better over time with Anders too. I think at first it was a very raw, emotive thing for him, whereas now he's able to kind of like find a pocket where he can do his singing voice, and I shouldn't be so harsh on him. I mean, and more power to him having the sheer testicle set to go out there and sing when you're a well-known death metal vocalist, and then you're like, I want to just kind of be able to sing and not scream all night, every night. So, yeah, but with respect to At the Gates and Thomas Lindberg, I'd be curious to see what his singing voice sounds like, and if I've missed it along the way, then that's my bad. I can't remember everything. But
he does a little cleaner stuff like in like the To Drink from the Night itself, but it's not like a singing. It's more like a talking or like just more of an atmosphere that he can add besides just his
right.
Thomas vocal or whatever. And do what you do best, I mean, shit. So this is what I would like to do. I know you got a few honorable mentions, but I have this list of a whole bunch of bands, and I'd like to try to mention as many as we can, just so we can cover everybody. Like I said, if people are like, you didn't say something about this band, I don't know every Swedish band. You can't just Google it, and every Swedish band ever is going to pop up.
Right.
A bunch will pop up, but I would just like to work through this list, and if it's one of your honorable mentions, we'll just kind of bounce back and forth.
Okay.
Let's give a minute or two to each band, just a little blurb about it.
If I know,
if you know it, or if it sticks out to you. But this band right here, Dark Tranquility. So these guys kind of fit right in with the In Flames, the At the Gates.
Yes.
They're one of those bands where for me they kind of flew under the radar, but they've been around doing it just as long, just as good. A lot of their music kicks ass. I just listened to their new album that came out last week, and they've been around for 25 plus.
Yep.
So 95. So that's 30 almost, right?
Yep.
But what a great band this was.
Yeah.
Everything I've ever bought from them, I'm like, here's a Dark Tranquility. Great album. The singer does sing clean in some of the newer stuff, but he does it really well. Like I told you the other day, that new Dark Tranquility album, it's badass. I'm definitely going to have to talk about it at the year end of review. I don't know if it'll make my top list, but what a great album it is. And these guys have put out a lot of great music. So what do you think about Dark Tranquility, brother?
Definitely a band that I could stand to show more appreciation for over, going forward in my life. And I've heard their music sporadically over my lifetime, and I've really appreciated it. I don't know what it is that never grabbed me, but I did always think as I was listening to them, and maybe it was this very thought, like, well, I've already got In Flames, and I've already got At the Gates, so I don't need like a third style of this band because this whole genre of music isn't all that I listen to.
Right.
You know, like I listen to a lot of extreme metal across the board, and then I listen to a lot of music that's not even metal.
Yeah.
So like when we start to get into what I would say almost like a replication of a band, and I hate to sound like that because if I listened to this band, I would throw more flowers on them.
Yeah.
I would show them more appreciation. I remember there being a little bit more keyboard element to their music, so there was that. I thought maybe like the harsh or the fry vocals weren't as strong as a Thomas Lindberg or even as unique as, say, Anders Frieden. But I bet if I were to go back and listen to them, I would have a lot more appreciation for them. Since they do have a new album out this year, and it is my goal to get in the best of the best this year and listen to everything and not just have the 10 that I like, but at least have some honorable mentions as well. We'll see where they fit in with that. I have to take the time to listen to them, but I love them. I mean, I love them for the fact that they sound like two of the bands that are on my list, maybe even three if you count Soilwork as well. I mean, they fall right in there with them. Unfortunately, in my ignorance and my inability to listen to all bands, Dark Tranquillity is one of those where I never took like the full deep dive or went out and bought an album.
Me too. I have a few albums, like I said, but and I'm right there with you. I probably should give them a little more mind, and maybe I will, but it's just hard to listen to everything. So.
I do want to say, and unless I am making shit up, I was standing in on bass for Ross's band Holloway. We played at Blondie's or anywhere, somewhere in Detroit. I think these guys were on the bill.
Oh, okay.
And that was a moment for me where I was like, this is probably the highlight of the night for me. Like these guys fucking rock. So I'd have to clear that with Ross. I honestly feel like they were on the bill. If I'm lying and making shit up,
well, we will find out next week.
Come back. I'm gonna get with Ross on that. I'm gonna slide into his DMs and be like, "Hey, man, did we?"
You don't have to. He's gonna be sliding into the seat. We'll just ask him when he shows up.
Fucking A. Well, no. Honest to God, I feel like we opened the night that night, or no, we didn't even open. We weren't even the first band. But anyway, I do believe that Dark Tranquillity. I shared a stage with them, and that's pretty cool. So I remember watching them and thinking these guys are fucking awesome. So
all right, next band. Opeth. For me, just a few things on Opeth.
Yeah.
Man, people fucking love these guys, and that's all I'm going to say about it. Because me, I don't know. I tried to listen to it. I fucking was almost bored to death, dude. I was literally fucking almost snoozing. I was like, Jesus, I don't know what I got to listen to. I don't know what the big deal about this is.
Yeah.
I mean, I do know what the big deal about it is. Don't let me sound ignorant. But I do know what the big deal about it is. These guys are fucking awesome musicians.
Yeah.
Like, they're great. Like, I seen something live by them the other day from Wacken.
Yeah.
2024.
Okay.
Wacken, right?
Yeah.
And it was great. It sounded awesome.
Yeah.
But it wasn't death metal. It was slow as fucking.
Yeah.
It was like it was like some ballad. And he even put on there, people said we wouldn't play a ballad live. Fuck it. We're playing a ballad live. And that's cool, but I don't want to go to a metal festival and see you play a ballad. I just don't.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man. Opeth, I probably have to listen to it more. I said this before on the show. I tried to listen to some after. Fucking 8-minute songs, man. You're killing me here, dude.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just don't. You're not BT Bam, and granted, BT Bam probably came after these guys, but at least they do enough shit to keep me interested. Opeth just seemed to fucking drone for me, and I may, don't pull my metal card, but
No.
I got to mention them because I know how great they are, and I respect them, but it's just not for me, I don't think, man.
Yeah.
I might have to dive deeper and take the time, but I don't know. Kind of snoozy for me, bro.
I would recommend some albums to get to know them by. I don't have the entire catalog. I will say that if we went into like Blackwater Park,
that's the one I tried to listen to, and I was just,
then you might not like this band. Yeah. You could go to. I'm looking for another one. It's Still Life, I think, is another one. I'm not seeing it on this list outright, which is pissing me off. So there was the one before it, which I thought was pretty good too. Yeah, Still Life. And then you got the follow-up to that, which was Deliverance, and I'm sorry, I lost my tab. That pisses me off. That's because I hit this button and then I lost it. So, yeah, we also have, it was Damnation and Deliverance, so it was kind of like two different albums at the same time.
Yeah.
So where the one is like the follow-up to Blackwater Park, and it would be considered like a death metal album. I loved it. I loved the first song I heard on it. I was like, oh my God, what is this band? And I went out and bought it. And then I found out they had this other album, Deliverance. And that was like, I think I'm getting these titles backwards because I think the heavy one is Deliverance and the slow one is Damnation. Yeah. So Damnation is the one with the white cover and it's like the all stripped down, like melodic and just clean and definitely indicative of the future of this band. And I think the reason they don't make my list, and they could slide right in at 5, I just happen to prefer Hypocrisy personally. There's so much variety going on here, and also, after enough social media bombardment of their lead vocalist, I just have a hard time. Like, I get that you're an artist. I get that you like your diversity, but something about this guy screams like pretentious and annoying. And I hate when that slides into my opinion of their music because I think he's a great musician. He can sing. He can do the fry vocals.
Yep.
I think we just get into like some really weird stuff after Damnation. I know Ross. We just mentioned the guy. He's huge on Ghost Reveries, and that's an album that I'm gonna have to like pull up and be able to speak to when we have him on the show because maybe that'll be a talking point for us. Dark Tranquility and Opeth will revisit. Great band. I appreciate them.
Great band.
But I think I had a quick, appreciation for them that kind of came and went. And again, to your point, you're talking 10, 12-minute songs. Like, it's just hard to listen to a song. Some of these things just go on, and you're like, what is happening? There's a lot of repetition, and they're known for that as well. I think when they get to the shorter songs, the style starts to change, and it's kind of hard to appreciate. But yeah, just a lot of work there. Definitely a band whose name I expected to be on the show, and I do appreciate some of their stuff, but by and large, I will probably skip the early stuff and then skip the later stuff. So it's just kind of like a sweet spot in the middle. And if that you're not appreciating, then I could see just like they're not for me.
Yeah, and that's where I'm at with them. Respect all day.
Yeah,
I know they're great at what they do.
Yeah,
but maybe what they do just isn't for me, and that's okay. I mean, that's just the way music works, right?
And I could also be totally misrepresenting and misunderstanding this man's personality, but I know he's the sole remaining member of this band.
Yeah.
And I just think that sometimes you read things and you're like, man, it just kind of comes off a certain way. And I bet if I met the guy, he'd be super laid back and chill and friendly, and I'd just be like, oh, I met him, I loved him, but
he's probably cool.
Just the way that I have this weird interpretation of him as a person that is maybe unfair, but I think he does great work.
Or untrue.
Yeah, totally. And I don't mean to speak out of pocket, but and maybe it's like a media slant that I'm getting,
right?
Just taking his quotes and kind of putting them out of context. But overall, I got to give him mad props as a musician and as an artist because he's done what he's wanted to do, and he's great at it. So props to Opeth.
All right, next band, Necrophobic. So I remember cranking the Nocturnal Silence tape all the time. I remember fucking loving that. Mm-hmm. They're satanic. They're a little more on the black and death metal side.
Yeah.
But I will tell you this. They just came out with an album this year called In the Twilight Gray.
Okay.
And it fucking bangs, dude.
Wow.
I thought I may have even sent that to you because I listened to it and I was like, dude, these guys fucking rule still.
Right.
I don't know anything about anything after the Nocturnal Silence. I just remember you having that tape and us playing it all the time, and I loved it.
Yeah.
And then they came out with something new this year and me wanting to listen to as many new releases. So their catalog I'd have to dive in, but I just wanted to mention them because they came up on the list, and you got to give them guys props because they've been around since 1993 or 1 or whatever too. So they've been doing it for a long time.
Yep.
But new album, great by them.
Super
Don't know
satanic.
what you got to say about Necrophobic.
Just the Nocturnal Silence for me, man. We would play that over and over and flip that tape nonstop. I think I still have that tape lying around.
Let's crank it.
I think we just laughed at like how evil it sounded and
the lyrics. I think we're just over the top as fuck.
The song titles and the lyrics, and I think when you get into that style of music and you're talking maybe like a Deicide self-titled or something like that in Legion, but I think that we were like, Deicide, but also Necrophobic, and I think that's kind of where it was for us, where there was maybe a next level of musicianship coming out of these guys, or just a little extra panache on the Satanism. But it was, I know that they've been around. Maybe they came and went, and they're back. So I'll have to listen to In the Twilight Gray as well, see how I feel about it. I have such nostalgia over the Nocturnal Silence. I couldn't see putting them in my top 5 based on the one album that I know.
No, not at all. I'm just naming some bands so we
get
can,
you. But I had them on my honorable mention list as well as Dark Tranquility and Opeth. So we're covering my honorables as well as we go.
Next one, The Crown. So The Crown. The reason why I got into The Crown is because I heard Thomas Lindberg was singing on a song on the 2000 album D. Thrace King. That was enough for me to buy the album because I figured maybe he was doing guest vocals on it. So he only did one song on D. Thrace King, right?
Sure.
He went on to do, I believe, the whole Crowned in Terror album. He's actually on that and started jamming with Crown during that time.
Okay.
But D. Thrace King is a great thrash death metal record. It does get a little tuka for me because it is thrash. These guys are thrash-tastic. They're fast. They're fucking... But they got really cool riffs. I don't know much about the rest of their catalog. Possessed 13 in 2003 was probably the last thing I listened to by them. They had some other ones. They re-released some stuff. Probably a band that I should revisit, but I just had to bring them up. And I do like a few things from The Crown. They have some bangers under their belt, so I had to bring them up. They're on the list. So what do you think about The Crown, buddy?
I know next to nothing about this band other than Thomas Lindberg was in it for a hot minute, and just a band that escapes me in my my life. I've never really sat down to enjoy them, but
I didn't know if you and I were sharing that D. Thrace King album and listening to it a lot, because I remember when it came out, I jammed it a lot, dude.
I'd be curious to listen to that Crowned in Terror. Was that any good? Just because of Thomas Lindberg on it?
I think it was just The Crown with Thomas Lindberg. Like the problem was I wanted At the Gates still. Yeah.
Sure. Fair.
And it's not At the Gates. I mean, it's The Crown. It's like way faster, more thrash, and like way more kind of straightforward. It's not as melodic. There's melody there, but it is really fast. But it's good. It's worth a listen. But the D. Thrace King is actually a really good album. So moving on, a few bands here. Don't pull my metal card again. Few bands here we're going to mention these next probably 4 bands.
Okay.
I don't know as much as I probably should know about them, speaking on Swedish metal, but these guys are all kings of Swedish metal. Like, you can't say Swedish metal and not say these bands. So the first band is going to be Entombed.
Yep.
They Left Hand Path. We talk, Mike from Centenary. Big fan of that. They spawned so many different genres off of this band, just with the chainsaw sound and the Swedish.
Or the HM2.
HM2.
Yep.
The Swedish sound. I know there's the Wolverine blues gets kind of confusing because it's not what Left Hand Path was, so people kind of got confused. For me, I was turned on to Entombed by the Wolverine blues because of that video that was on that one video we watched all the time. It was like a compilation.
Decade of Independence or
something like that. Yeah. It was like Roadrunner or Metal Blade or something like that, right?
Century Media.
Yeah, Century Media, one of those. And it was kind of like, it was bluesy. It was like kind of hard rock bluesy for me. You know what I mean? Like, and it wasn't bad. It's just that was never enough for me to get into Entombed. And when you start at Wolverine Blues or a song off of Wolverine Blues, that was my impression of them, and it was never enough to go back. But you can't say Swedish metal without saying Entombed. What do you think?
Yeah, same. I know for some people, maybe they see the title of this episode and they're like, oh, can't wait till they talk about Entombed. Just never really grabbed my attention too much so that I could appreciate them properly. I think it was, in fact, the very sound that they kind of cultivated and would have many replicants spawn in their likeness over, that HM2 sound. But I just don't think there was enough melody there for me, and probably a band that I'd have to listen to more of. But I think end of the day, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe it was the Wolverine Blues. It sounded like the precursor to like 6 Feet Under. Am I?
Yeah. It's real slow and blah. Yeah. And I think it's just that I'm not familiar enough with Left Hand Path. I probably should listen to this. I think some of these bands, this Big Four. So the Big Four, I'm just going to say right now, of the country is considered Entombed, Grave, Unleashed, and this next band I'm about to talk about, which will be Dismember. But Wolverine Blues, kind of slow, kind of just not there. And like I said, when you hear one song that represents the band, if that's not enough to get you into the band,
right,
that's kind of where it stopped and ended for me. So
yeah, I think all of these
bands
do go very well together. I got Grave on the list as well. I think that first album, when I heard it, was like blew me away. So
so let's just move on for time's sake. We'll blast through some of these.
I had the Unleashed album. I think that we like the blue one or something we listened to, and Yeah.
So Dismember, a little more familiar with these guys. I know these guys were a little more on the death metal side for me, so I like these guys a little bit more. I'm a little bit more familiar with their catalog, but not enough to sit here and name off a bunch of stuff. I know they formed in '88 and split up in 2011, then got back together after 8 years in 2019. Like I said, they are considered the big four of Swedish metal or death metal. Another band that I probably, of these four bands, maybe Grave and Dismember would be the bands that I would like to listen to a little bit more, but who knows? All these bands I just don't have that many hours. I actually have to go to work and stuff, which is stupid. And then the next one, Unleashed. Talking about Unleashed, huge discography. These guys started in '89. I mean, the discography on these guys is, whew, check them out in the shower, bro. They have they got some girth on them, bro. But another band that I probably should listen to more. Just a band that when I listened to, I remember us jamming it back in the day. It didn't give me enough. It was kind of slow. It was kind of like really mid-paced. I think just being into death and At the Gates and these bands that are a little more technical, melodic, sometimes bands like this are hard to get into for me because they just don't give me enough in the department of paying attention to like what's going on.
Yeah.
But I could be completely wrong too. So I just don't know enough about them, but I have to speak on them being a Swedish death metal band. What about you?
What's that?
Same difference on Unleashed?
Unleashed.
Yeah.
I just remember having that one album and it just didn't like sink its hooks into me. It was just kind of one that I was exploring. And again, you go back to like cover art, band logo. It's a death metal band. I've never heard it. I'm buying it just off the rack. And you listen to it, and again, like you say, it's not the melodic death metal that we had come to know and love. And it's just kind of like something that I didn't understand. I'd have to revisit it and listen to it, but I would not speak ill of them being, champions of Swedish death metal. But I, for my part, have like the more melodic stuff that I could comprehend. Whereas when I listened to the one album at the time, it just didn't resonate. It just didn't do anything for me. And I felt like if I listened to it now, I would have a similar opinion because I know my taste well enough now to where I'm not going to suddenly start liking brutal death metal beyond like the little bit of appreciation that I have for it. So when I say death metal, I'm usually referring to a lot of melodic stuff, whereas I'm not talking about like early raw Cannibal Corpse stuff. I got to have more melody or more groove. Yeah. But when people are just like brutal trem picking grind beat blast beats, I just am like, it starts to get noisy, and that's why I pull my metal card. Like I don't listen to brutal death metal. I listen to like melodic death metal and stuff that's got groove to it because I get lost in those beats. I think he just kind of watered down the musicianship when it's nonstop drums blaring off, but.
I think Unleashed, if I'm remembering this correctly, they're just kind of more of a mid-pace. Like they could be in that 6 feet under a little bit,
probably
a little bit above that, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Another one we can talk about is Grave. Our friend Eric Stroud, he's such a big, huge fan of Grave. I know there's a lot of people out there, big, huge fans of Grave.
I remember that first album when we listened to it. It was both mind-blowing. I was like, this is so cool, and it was old at the time.
HM2, just that guitar, just that strong guitar. Another band that I would probably have to dive into some more of their music. Just a long, girthy list here, too, they have. So, I mean, more albums. They've been around since '88, so them guys have been doing it. And so I'm going to just would you have anything else you want to speak of? Because I'm just going to go through some of these bands, and some of them I don't even know, but I do want to make sure that I mention as many bands from Sweden, just to throw their band name out there. So
just the last one that I would mention that I do own an album by this band, Catatonia.
Okay.
City Burials. Yep. I tried it out when it came out, and I just maybe wasn't in the mood for it. It didn't really resonate with me. I think it's way more stripped down, kind of falls into that Opeth category where you've got a lot of clean vocals on it and very instrumental. I want to give it another try. I want to revisit it and see if like I understand it better and it resonates with me. I think I kind of wanted to have the duality of heavy and musical, whereas it just seems to be like very instrumental and musical and rockish, where I want metal to slap me in the face at some point along the way. And I don't think it was very heavy. I just think it was something that maybe more avant-garde or more just instrumental and, with musicianship on display, a lot of melody, a lot of depressing sounds, almost starting to get into some doomy aspects, but not like doom metal as we know it, but That's the only other band I had on my honorable mention list because they are very prominent in that scene. They got a lot of work that they've been putting out over the years. That's the one that I got on board with. That's 2020, so I think they've got the Sky Void of Stars since then in 2023, so they've got at least one new one. I'd have to get into their catalog to know if they were heavy along the way and then kind of moved on from it because they've been around forever, it looks like. Since,
yeah, they have been, for sure.
Early 90s, even 1993. So that's the only other band I was going to speak to is I do own an album by them. It didn't resonate with me. It's not bad, but I think I just wanted something heavier. And when we're talking about extreme metal, I'm not going to really put a band in there that I just own an album by one off. But
yeah, and some of these bands they're that I'm going to mention right now, they've had different genres mixed in their discography,
Sure.
like Edge of Sanity. That's one of them. They've kind of been all over the board.
Don't know them.
Yeah, so I remember seeing their name a lot back in the Metal Maniacs magazine. But you got band Nihilist, not too familiar with them. Carnage, Bloodbath. One band that I have listened to, very death metal. Dan Swano is in this band. Another band that I should pay more attention to. You got Amon Amarth.
Yeah,
I'm good on those guys. Too happy.
With the Viking metal or rowing.
Yeah,
did they start the oar rowing?
Yeah,
thing?
they did. Now people are doing that all the time.
They did it
at other people's concert.
Yeah,
that's
Slaughter to Prevail.
Yeah,
even
stupid.
Yeah, Alex Terrible sat down on stage and he was doing it with on stage while the whole audience is doing it, and he even got him. He's like, stupid.
Yeah,
but it's funny.
Yeah. Vomitory, Repugnant, Incision.
Nope.
That's with S. Kamos, God Macabre, Grotesque, which I want to say Grotesque was like
Repugnant. I see.
Grotesque. He the singer from At the Gates, Thomas.
Okay.
I think that was like his side project or other band that he was in. So Sorcery, Intermint, Seance. I know that was a band we had a little.
Yeah, I got the tape.
Yeah, we had a little. We dived into Seance a little bit. Tiamat.
Yep.
They're kind of a little more industrial, weird, weren't they? Like progressive kind of with some metal. Flesh Crawl, Morpheus Descends, Ceremonial Oath, Cemetery, Deranged, Sentinix, General Surgery, Dawn, Panthymonium, Visceral Bleeding, Sarcasm, Sorcery, Rune Magic, Wombath, Putrefaction, Liars in Wait, Rib Spreader, Satriol, Maze of Torment, Dominion. And then you got, here's a couple other bands from Sweden that we have to talk about, but they may not just be death metal. But Bathory, they, the Kings, the classic black metal guys, they were from Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
You got Ghost, say what you will about them.
Rock.
Arch Enemy.
Yeah.
They're from Sweden. They kind of fit in with that
that old
newer
stuff
school, but still Dark Tranquility kind of thrash metal type stuff.
Another one of those bands that too happy for me.
Yeah.
And man, I don't want to be disrespectful, but I know how good a guitarist Michael Amott is. Michael Amott or Amott, and to hear the material that he's cranking out, knowing that he's such a gifted musician that I just can't get behind his songwriting. I know he's just a top tier shredder, but I listen to his songs now and I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm lost. I'm confused. I want more depth in the music. I want it to be more impactful, but I just don't get it. Good for him. His career's taken off. Get that bag, but I don't think it's even about the money. I just think he kind of found a pocket of songwriting that he's good at. It just doesn't resonate with me.
That's fair.
I would love to hear him go back to some of the older stylings that he was started out on.
Okay. And then where did I leave off? So we said Arch Enemy, Marduk, so black metal Kings, Hammerfall, Way Too Happy. We did get to see those guys, but good for them. Sabaton, they're power metal too, not for me. Candlemass, so that's a doom metal band and definitely familiar with those guys, but it is doom metal and probably some of the earlier doom metal, to be honest with you. But I think Candlemass is a band that you have to mention if you're talking about Sweden. And then a few other ones I've mentioned already. The Haunted is one that we haven't
bring them up already.
So we haven't spoke about that. The Haunted, I do like The Haunted. I really like the Haunted. They got some great stuff. I think the Haunted did almost fill the gap for me after the At the Gates thing because of the members being in the same band and stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember a few of the records I listened to a lot and I really like, but they are thrash metal, so a lot of dukas. You got Evergrey, Enforcer, Therion, Vintersorg, Shining, which is black metal, Scar Symmetry, Waitin, Wolf, Grand Magus, Avatarium, Nephilim, Life Lover, Draconian.
I like Draconian a lot, but that's doom metal.
Yep, that's doom. Morga Le Fay, Armanthe, Witchcraft, Burst, October Tide, Cult of Luna, Sonic Syndicate, and Nocturnal Rites. And that was just some other bands that were from Sweden. There's a few other on there, but none I've never really heard of. So
yeah. I don't know. Nasum was the one that popped up. I don't know if that got mentioned.
I didn't mention those guys. I did not know. Are they grind from Sweden, huh?
I'll have to look here. What did it say? Where did I just see their band name? In Solitude was another one.
Yep, Swedish grindcore, so that's a good one. Nasum.
Yeah, it does say Sweden. I got the Candlemass At the Gates as well. Steel, never heard of them. Edge of Sanity's listed. I'm just looking at some other lists.
Sure.
Vinterland, you mentioned. Dismember, you mentioned. Dissection, and Bathory. Yeah, I mean, so we got all of the bands and some in there. Some of these bands loosely fit the description. Some are just, they happen to be from the
Sweden.
area. Yeah. Smothered. I don't know if there was a band name that you mentioned, but now we're just getting into like the swamp, like I don't know a lot of these bands. I'm just going back to the Haunted. I remember I felt like they had more of a punk feeling or a hardcore feeling to them.
Yeah, very thrash punk. Yeah.
But I did love them. I think it was a little bit hard to accept that vocalist after Thomas Lindberg because I felt like the guy was more yelling instead of like the Fry vocal.
Yeah.
There's a difference, like to the outsider there's not a difference, but when you know what a Fry vocal is compared to like just some hardcore yelling, well, I don't want to hear hardcore yelling. I want to hear Fry vocals.
Yeah.
There's a difference.
Yep.
So it matters to somebody who likes the genre of music. So that was kind of one of the deal breakers for me. I love the music, and I could go back and get into it more because as far as hardcore yelling goes, I prefer him to some other hardcore yelling where it's just like just yapping and yelling. But yeah, that's probably one of the other bands that I wanted to mention or have mentioned on the show because I did appreciate a lot of the Haunted's work.
Yeah, their very first one, the self-titled one, there's a couple songs on there that now I want to listen to that today because there's a couple songs on there I remember being so sweet. I was like, damn, this is badass.
I think just in closing, like there's a lot of bands that came out of Sweden, just a small little country, probably about the size of Florida, maybe a little bigger, but just what a huge impact on the entire genre when we start getting into that Stockholm sound and just the various different sounds that came out of it, yet nonetheless all of it mostly by and large melodic and thrashy and groovy and just some top-tier work coming out of that country, a small little pocket of the world that all of a sudden just blows up, and you've got, like, nobody cares about any other music but metal in that country is my impression of it. Like, I don't know if they do pop. I don't know if they do rock over there. I don't know if it's just a whole country full of, like, metalheads. He just traipsing through the woods, chopping down trees, shooting videos. But my impression of Sweden, by and large, is just a country full of metalheads and awesome bands left and right coming out of there. I mentioned my top 5: Hypocrisy, Soilwork, and Flames, Meshuggah, At the Gates. There's a whole host of them that Jay mentioned, and I think that when you're listening to metal, you just kind of have to know that Sweden for a time was like the capital of metal, or at least kicking out some of the world's best metal
stuff. Yeah,
and
sure.
Like once you get to Tampa, then you move on from that, you get to Sweden. And then now we're kind of everywhere and anywhere because you got the internet and it's more accessible to hear any band from anywhere on the earth. So, yeah, I think that a nice little blast from the past, bringing up some of these band names. Like I feel like I kind of want to listen to a little Hypocrisy today, revisit that. Might even revisit some of the At the Gates that I haven't listened to in a while. I'm kind of good on In Flames right now. Like I just saw them live. Same with Meshuggah. Just saw them and went through a whole bunch of both of their catalogs. I might want to check out that Soilwork album that's come out since.
Okay, yeah. I would like to do that too. I actually want to listen to a little more Unleashed Grave dissection. and Dismember, stuff that I haven't really listened not Dissection, but Dismember, excuse me.
All that HM2 stuff, though?
Yeah, I'd like to just kind of go through a little bit of it, just so I'm a little more familiar with it, because I feel like I should be more familiar with that stuff. It's just one of those things. You don't have all the time in the world to listen to all the bands. And when they have 30 albums, it's like, now you have 30 albums, and I'm just getting into you. Like, so you're trying to tell me that if I just wanted to listen to you, where do I start? And then... if there's some shitters along the way, that's a lot of time invested.
Just because of the amount of times it's been mentioned in the short time that we've been doing this podcast, I think I owe it to everyone to maybe just come forth with a solid listen to Entombed's Left Hand Path. Yeah. I feel like that's been mentioned many times, and I feel like I owe it to myself and the community to just say, I listened to it, and I have at least the ability to now formulate an opinion of them. I think similar to you, because of the decade of independence with the Century Media VHS, I kind of come in after the fact, and it was like way too much distortion still, and it just didn't really resonate with me. When you want Carcass Heartwork or Death Symbolic, and then you hear that, you're like, it's not for me.
Not even playing the same game, bro.
But now it's like, now it'll be new to me, even if it's old, and I might have a different appreciation for it now, especially if it's groovy. I tend to find that my tastes are more groove than grind or thrash. So even though I came up with thrash, it was more thrash metal. But yeah, I think that's one I want to listen to. So coming away from this episode, we'll see if I get some listening. And now that I can be done listening to Sepultura, I'm free. Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you guys enjoyed that episode, you can rank us on your favorite streaming platform. Yeah. We would appreciate that, so we can try to move up the list, get more listeners. If you're watching this on YouTube, that'd be cool if you subscribed. Also, let us know in the comment section below. You can now comment on Spotify as well. So leave us a comment on any platform and let us know like what your top 5 Swedish bands are, maybe one we missed, or tell us where to start with Grave Unleashed, Dismember. Like, tell us where to start, what are the best ones, so we can get into that and listen to that and not have our metal card pulled because we don't know the big 4 of Swedish death metal.
Right.
But maybe it's just not for us either. You know, we're a different kind of breed here at the Metal Maniacs Podcast. So,
and I know when like we talked about this, it was like I was starting to get a little nervous because I didn't mention any of those big 4. I'm like, I think some people might have expectations that we talk about those bands, but for me, maybe I'm a little fast and loose with the death metal term because I'm always like leaning toward that melodic side. I still dare say to the average lay person, the bands that I mentioned today are death metal, even if they have like a lot of diversity in their catalog or they veered off of that. Yeah. I think all of them have their place in death metal, and I'm sticking to my guns on it, even if I didn't mention like the internet's top 4 Swedish death metal bands. I think some of those bands just sound a little repetitive to me, and that's why I like these other bands, is because there's a lot of melody in their instrumentation. So I'm standing with my bands today.
Do it. All right.
For sure.
With that being said, y'all keep it metal. Much love. Peace. Thank you so much for checking out the episode. Be sure to hit that like button and give us a share.
Yeah, and if you enjoyed our podcast today, please give it a rating on your streaming service to help us gain some exposure.
And if you really enjoyed the show, please give us a follow or hit that subscribe button and come hang out with us every week. And remember, keep it metal.